Hi, this is Vicki Peterson from the Bangles, and you are listening to Icon Fetch.
Out of Cleveland, Ohio, came the Raspberries. Led by Eric Carmen, they scored a monster hit in 1972 with Go All the Way. Please go all the way. Carmen led the band through 4 studio albums before embarking on a successful solo career in the mid-'70s, scoring hits like Never Gonna Fall in Love Again, Hungry Eyes, and All By Myself. And writing hits for other people, including Almost Paradise for Ann Wilson and Mike Reno. Finally, in 2004, the original Raspberries reunited to commemorate the grand opening of the House of Blues in Cleveland. Now that historic night has been made public with the release of Pop Art Live, a 2-CD live set featuring 28 songs, everything the band played on that first night, made available through Omnivore Recordings. And to talk about it, will you welcome in Eric Carmen. Eric, how are you, man?
I'm great, Tony. How are you?
We're doing fantastic.
Great lead-up, by the way.
Well, thanks. It's good.
Everything.
Oh, try. So this is 2004. You guys reunited, and it's been quite a while since then. So what was kind of the catalyst for getting this particular concert released through Omnivore? How did that come about?
We played the concert in 2004, and at the time, I knew that we were recording it. But later on in 2005, we played in Los Angeles, and a friend of mine from Darien Sound Naja from Brian Wilson's band called me the day before and said, would you like Mark Lynette to record the show tomorrow night? And I thought, sure. Mark Lynette has been... he's the Grammy-winning engineer, and he's been archiving all of the Beach Boys stuff for about the last 20 years.
Right, yeah, this guy's great, yeah.
He's a super engineer, and I said that would be great. I don't think we can afford him. And he said, I'll put you in touch with him. And Mark said, I'll do it free. So he showed up, and he set up all his gear in a little booth somewhere, and there was a very late load in that night. I hardly even had a chance to say hello to him. I literally ran by, shook his hand, got on stage, did a sound check, ran back out. And shortly thereafter, he said, do you want to do something with this? And so he and I kind of long distance sent MP3s back and forth and tried mixing that 2005 show at the House of Blues on Sunset Strip that way. Eventually, I think we gave it to Rykodisc, label.
Yep.
And immediately upon handing them the finished product, they said, we've decided to go in another direction. So it's one of those things. I actually told Al Jardine that story, and he shook his head and he laughed. He goes, yep, I understand.
Right.
One of those things that just happens in the music business, and so that album was just sort of dead in the water. And fast forward to maybe a year and a half ago, and Jim Bonfanti, our drummer, had these tapes, and I have a very good friend he's a good friend of the whole band really in New York, named Tommy Allen, and he's a drummer and producer and multi-talented guy and the nicest guy in the world. And Jim quietly sent the tapes up to New York through Bernie Hojay, the guy who runs my website. And Bernie and Tommy sat down and they kind of went to work. Tommy gave the tapes to Bernie gave the tapes to Tommy. Tommy went in the studio and very slowly started to work on remixing the tape, because it had never been mixed at all. It was just straight off the board. And Jim was hesitant to tell me or any of the other guys in the band anything about it, because there have been, from time to time, some frictions within members of the band.
Right.
And he was afraid that if members found out that I was involved in it, that they would be very unhappy and they would want to be involved. And if I found out that somebody else in the band was involved and I wasn't, I would be unhappy. So it was actually a pretty smart plan. He kept it quiet.
Right.
And then one day, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, I got a little email from Tommy, and he said, it was the subject line said, "Not a bad little band." And it was a little MP3. It was unlabeled, and I hit play, and I'm sitting at my desk and have this little Bose speaker behind me. And about 40 seconds in, it was no reply. And about 40 seconds in, I realized, hey, that's not the Beatles, that's us. Unbelievable.
Right.
The Beatles for about, a minute or so.
Nice.
Until it dawned on me, wait a minute, that's not the record.
This happened once before, when I came to your door, no reply. They said it wasn't you, but I saw you peep through your window.
And then Tommy started to send me regular emails with all his mixes, and we had some comments here and there, but for the most part, we left Tommy alone, and he did a superb job. And because he is such a supporter and great fan of the band and has been for 30 years, and he knows what we really should have sounded like. And so this new version of that 2004 show has got a lot more punch and sounds much more like the band than the 2005 Live on Sunset Strip album did, mostly because Tommy just, he wanted it to have guts.
When you smiled at me, and I saw your eyes, all I ever wanted to be was in your arms tonight.
He captured it.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's interesting, back in the day when you guys, in the early 70s, did you ever have any professional grade equipment record any of your concerts for a possible release?
No. We were the most unrecorded and unphotographed band maybe in history.
Yikes.
We played Carnegie Hall.
Wow.
Headline Carnegie Hall in 1973. And nobody in our record label or our publishing company or anyone thought to record it. We said, hey, maybe think we ought to record this or something. And as it turns out, there was not a photographer to be found anywhere. There's one guy who was sitting in the audience that night who happened to snap some pictures, and they're the only known photographs of the band on stage at Carnegie Hall.
At Carnegie Hall. Unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
Wow.
And this guy sort of wants an arm and a leg for any
Of course
picture.
he does.
I
Right.
have one copy
Right.
on my wall, but it's just unbelievable that it's kind of and that's just kind of a symptom of what was going on at that time at between Capitol Records and the band. There's a total disconnect in terms of them understanding what we were and what they didn't even get the name. Our first album came out and it had the Raspberries scratch and sniff sticker on it that smelled like raspberries, and on the back of the album they had a picture of these 4 little raspberries or something on a little vine. And in reality, the name Raspberries came from the Bronx Cheer. It was supposed. We hated the way music had changed and progressive rock had kind of taken over FM radio, and instead of Pete Townsend slashing away at I Can't Explain on this guitar, you were getting 10-minute flute solos by Ian Anderson, and that bored us to death. And so we were formed as kind of a poke in the eye to progressive rock. And Capitol didn't get it at all. They thought it's the 4 little they're raspberries,
right,
they're fuzzy red fruit. And it's, no, we're not.
I mean, and it's good. You talk about the fact you guys didn't record anything back then, so this is the next best thing, and really this is something you truly can be proud of for all time? I mean, this is like the fury of the Raspberries captured on tape kind of thing, you know.
Thank you. It was an interesting experience because we hadn't played together for 32 years. And so to put the band back together and get everybody, you know, remembering their parts and able to do the vocals and rearrange things and whatever, and also be able to do it with the augmentation of these 3 extra musicians that we had, which we affectionately call the overdubs.
Right. Yeah, that's great.
Which we didn't have before, that allowed us to duplicate much more of the stuff that we did in the studio, where maybe Wally played 3 guitar parts on a particular record, and now we could do all 3 of those live.
Right.
So we had that, and then on top of it, just the technology today is so much better. You know, playing the House of Blues here with a great sound system and a good monitor system and good lights and everything else made the whole thing much, much better.
Sure. Now you got 28 tracks on this collection, 22 Raspberry songs. I got to ask, were there songs that you guys were doing live for the first time?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
As a matter of fact, we got together and I sat down and looked at all the albums to start writing up possible song lists, and there was very little that I left off between the 4 albums. I don't know if there were 10 songs that maybe we didn't play, but we played most of, probably 75% of all the material we recorded that night. And then there were a couple of new things like the covers of Ticket to Ride and No Reply and Babies in Black, which is my personal favorite.
Oh dear, what can I do? Babies in black and I'm feeling blue. Tell me on, what can I do?
And I Can't Explain by The Who.
I'm feeling sad. Can't explain. Certain can. Can't explain.
And then there were a couple of songs that I had, before the Raspberries formed, I used to go see the other 3 guys, and they were in a band called The Choir. And The Choir had a modest national hit with a song called It's Cold Outside.
And now it's cold outside. It's cold outside. And the rain is pouring down. And the leaves are turning brown. Can't you see?
Right, yeah.
And since we were playing in Cleveland, where that record was number 1, I suggested maybe we ought to play that song and we'll rearrange it for this band. My goal and dream at that point was just to get in their band. So,
right.
Eventually I did.
Right.
It was kind of the long way around. Jim and I formed the band, and then we added Wally, and then finally Dave came into the band. So I did get in the choir, but it's a long way around.
Right.
But in any case, Wally had a song called When You Were With Me. That he wrote for the choir, that I thought was one of his nicest songs. And I thought, we should really play that. His family's going to be there, and there are people in Cleveland that would know that song. So we included that, and then we did It's Cold Outside as well. And I think they came off really well.
The other thing that I think stands out from the Live at Sunset Strip is I feel like there's an energy to these recordings. Because, you guys were holed up in a rehearsal space for several months practicing. Mm-hmm. This was the first time you've stepped in front of an audience in 32 years. Mm-hmm. There's got to be some butterflies going and all that kind of stuff. You're running on adrenaline and that kind of stuff. I think that also differentiates the 2 recordings, because the other one was a year later. You guys had been together for a while kind of thing.
Right. I think you're absolutely right, and that's totally true. We really didn't know quite what to expect when we walked out on the stage, and backstage we kind of did little fist bumps, and it was like we felt like 4 guys in a trench about to get shelled.
Right.
And the curtain opened, and everything just went off like clockwork. And we breathed a sigh of relief, but we had a ton of energy, and it sounded great. And we hadn't played together in all these years, and here it was, everything all together, and it was great fun, and we all enjoyed it.
If we were older, we wouldn't have to be wood tonight. Baby, oh, I wanna be with you. So baby, woo, baby, I wanna be with you. Oh yeah.
That's fantastic. And I mean, times have changed a lot in the music business, but isn't it crazy that I'm looking here, and I think the intention is to put out Pop Art Live on vinyl later in the year, kind of thing?
I believe it's coming out in November.
Right.
There's going to be 3 vinyl records, 33 RPM records. All different colors, I think.
Oh, wow,
I think
nice.
There's going to be a blue one, a red one, and a yellow one.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's nice that there are, well, first of all, it's great that you have record labels like Omnivore. These guys are great. I mean, they've done a lot of stuff with the Big Star reissues, and they've just done so many great stuff. And, and in addition, it's got to be kind of odd to see this kind of, from your vantage point, this vinyl resurgent, I mean, there was a time when you couldn't buy a piece of vinyl anywhere, and it's
I know. It's funny because my kids got down, the crawl space in my basement where I have all my, many, many cartons of hundreds and hundreds of albums from many years ago. And all of a sudden my daughter got down there and she started pulling stuff out. And then she bought a turntable. And
nice.
She's up in her room playing vinyl now. And it's like, she's like, Dad, these are really cool.
Right. Everything old is new again, I guess, right? I don't know.
Exactly.
So, that's crazy. So let me switch gears here for just a moment. One of the last things you put out was they did an essential Eric Carmen, which was about the most comprehensive look at your career that had ever been done. I mean, there was even like a pre-Raspberries song on there, which was kind of cool. And you get live stuff and everything. And I read an interview with you where you said you were amazed at the remastering of this, that like it was actually bringing out things that maybe you had even forgotten about, kind of thing. So,
well, yeah, I'd actually, produced records and arranged records and even been to mastering sessions before. But I'd never, all of my records were recorded analog, which means on tape. And I had never been to a remastering session where, somebody had taken, in this case, this genius that Sony employs named Mark Wilder, who is a Grammy-winning remastering engineer. Mark had the job of converting all the analog tapes into digital format so that we could now go back in and see if we could fix stuff, and that first song on the album was something I recorded when I just turned 18, and in my first band, and it was supposed to be the B-side of the record, and the guys who were producing it actually came out. I was sitting at the piano in the recording studio in New York one day, and they said, Eric, what's your worst song? And I said, why?
Okay.
They said, well, we got to have a B-side. And I said, well, why would you want to put my worst song on the B-side? And they said, well, we don't want any DJs to get confused or music directors and turn it over and play the wrong side.
Right.
I said, did you ever hear I Get Around by the Beach Boys? And the B-side is Don't Worry Baby.
Don't Worry Baby, yeah, absolutely.
And, Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields Forever.
Right, yeah, I mean, you're a big Beatles guy, and all the Beatles, I mean, every one of those Beatles A-side had a killer B-side, just about.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
I said, why not give people, like, more than they think they're getting?
Right, yep.
Give them 2 good songs. So he was absolutely determined, and so I sat and I played that song for him on the piano, and I thought, how can I make this really bad? And it was kind of like a Who song or something, so I kind of just played it on the piano, and he's about halfway through. He said, yeah, that's great. That sucks.
Gee, thanks. Wow, great. Yeah.
Actually, at the time, I was thinking, mission accomplished.
Right.
And the next day, we recorded it in 2 takes. And these guys had spent an enormous amount of money destroying 2 of my better songs. And then this was like a 2-take, guitar, bass, and drums. I asked them if I could put a rhythm guitar on it. They said no. We want it to suck, Eric.
Great.
And, of course, 2 weeks later, they put it out, or whatever. Then when they put it out, it flipped in 2 weeks, and that became the A side.
Isn't that funny? God.
We got in the remastering studio, and Tim Smith from Sony Legacy said, what do you want to start with? And I said, I don't know. And he said, how about Get the Message? That's the song. And I went, really? And I had this dread feeling of
right.
I'm going to hear this really awful sounding thing recorded in 1968. And Mark Wilder put up the song, and he started to tweak things with his little. He's like a mad scientist in this control room with all this vintage gear and a couple of huge speakers out in the studio. And about 15 minutes later, he turned around and he looked at me and he says, so what do you think? And I said, I was watching what he was doing, and I thought, wow,
right.
Look what we can do here.
Yeah.
And I said, gee, do you think we could beef up that bass drum a little bit and make the bass sound a little rounder and make me sound not quite so prepubescent? And
right.
we tweaked a few things here and there, and by the time we got done, instead of being humiliated and horrified, I actually thought, this turned out pretty cool.
Yeah.
We've been going together so long. Can't you feel that there's something wrong? You only take me out of way. Come on.
Yeah. And we were kind of off and running from there, and we, I think all the stuff from my first solo album sounds 3 times as good as it ever sounded
Absolutely.
at the time.
Yep.
Sunrise, shine down a little love on the world today. Make a morning so sweet that it'll have to chase my blues away.
And the other part of the album, that essential album that was fun, is it started out as 15 songs when I first spoke to Tim Smith. And at a certain point, he said, this has to be 30 songs. So he went to his boss, Adam Block at Legacy, and he said, this has got to be 30 songs. This guy's got more great songs than you can shake a stick at. And Adam said, okay. So Tim and I sat down and picked out, I got to pick out some of the best songs that I've ever written that no one's ever heard. Because they
right.
ended up on an album that either didn't get promoted properly or whatever. But, some of my best stuff, some songs were not ever released as singles, and so people just aren't really aware of them. And I got to put those, a bunch of those onto this album. And so it was really kind of, and I also wrote one new song, the very last track.
Right, yeah, Brand New Year.
Happy New Year's Eve, drink a toast to all the ghosts we leave behind us.
Yeah.
Brand New Year, which Tim said to me at some point, he said, if you would write something new, that would be a really nice bookend to this, from the beginning of your career to right now. And I hadn't written anything in a very long time because the music business has kind of gone into a very weird place.
Right.
And there really wasn't any point in doing it. Also, I had 2 young children, and my piano's right underneath where their bedrooms were.
Oh, yikes, okay.
So at a certain point in time, I could not sit down at the piano at 11 o'clock at night and start to work. So I just didn't do it for a long time. And then my kids kind of grew up. And so when Tim suggested I write something new, I thought about what would I write. He was helpful with suggestions, and we had a power out here in October of 2013, like the big first heavy snow, the one that bends all the trees over. And,
right.
And where I live I'm surrounded by trees, and the power went out, and I was sitting in my living room I have one of those like miner's flashlights that you strap on your head, and I was reading a book
right,
with the fireplaces roaring, and there wasn't a sound in the house, and that I found out that is the greatest catalyst to writing for me, is a complete vacuum of everything else.
Interesting.
I can actually hear the electricity hum during the daytime.
Right.
And when the power went out, it was just so silent. And the piano was in the same room, probably 10 feet away, and at some point I put the book down, and I went over and I put my fingers on the keys, and out popped Brand New Year. Just boom, just like that.
Wow.
And I wrote the lyrics over the next couple of days and a bridge for it, and recorded a lot of it in my living room, and then ran out to Los Angeles and got my buddies from Brian Wilson's band to complete the instrumental and background vocals in literally 2 days, and mixed it, and there you have it.
And there you have it. Nice.
I must say that Go All the Way, my very first hit record, which was I wrote when I was 21 and was a hit in 1972, was included on the Guardians of the Galaxy soundtrack in 2014, and that became one of 4 albums in the entire year that went platinum.
Yeah.
Taylor Swift was one, Sam Smith was another one, Pentatonics was the third one, and Guardians of the Galaxy. The fourth, the million-selling album of the year. And since the second Guardians of the Galaxy, Awesome Mix Tape 2 has come out in May, I think, Awesome Mix Tape 1 jumped back on the charts.
Wow. Yeah, everybody,
It's been going strong ever since.
And that's just crazy. I mean, it's great that young kids now can sing along to Go All the Way and Ain't No Mountain High Enough and all these other great songs that, kind of the test of time. And, I mean, that's just something where they came to you, right? The people that were put that movie together just came to you.
Absolutely. And it turns out James Gunn, the director of the film, is a fan. And he had made a movie called Super maybe 10 or 12 years ago with Rainn Wilson and Liv Tyler, and Kevin Bacon plays like a drug dealer and a thug who beats up Rainn Wilson, has his thugs beat up Rainn Wilson in one scene. And I had heard that at some point James Gunn discovered the song It Hurts Too Much from my lead-off track on my 4th solo album.
Right.
And he decided to re-choreograph the entire fight scene to that song, which turned out great because I was watching the movie. It's a very dark comedy. But that scene came along, and it was like, this is so cool.
I've got to find a way, I know, to let you go, 'cause it hurts you much.
Yeah, I got to check that out because It Hurts Too Much that's got Carmine Appice playing drums on it. It's a pretty nice.
It was kind of an obscure Eric Carmen song for James Gunn to have picked, and so
right.
So the day that Guardians of the Galaxy came out, I friended him on Facebook. It was a Thursday night, and they were premiering the movie in Los Angeles, and I wrote him a little private message. I said, you're probably very, very busy now, but I just wanted to say thank you for including my song in your soundtrack. And I didn't really expect to hear anything back. And literally 2 hours later, he said, no, thank you. I'm happy to use your music anytime in my films.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, and that's what you want. I mean, ultimately, that's what you want. You want your music to carry on to generations, and that's fantastic.
As a songwriter, it's always my ultimate goal was to write songs that live forever, that are become standards and classics, and to some extent that's happened. So I'm a lucky guy.
Right, absolutely. All right, Eric, it's been great talking to you, man. The new Raspberries, you got it. Pop Art Live is the new double disc set from the Raspberries from Omnivore Recordings, and we wish you luck on it, all right?
Thanks very much. Great talking to you.
You've been listening to Icon Fetch with Tony Peters. Want more great interviews? Head over to iconfetch.com. There, you'll find every interview we've ever done, plus CD reviews, This Day in Music, and a random album of the day. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter. Who is Tony going to interview next? It could be you. Send what you've got to Tony Peters, Icon Fetch, P.O. Box 292134, Dayton, Ohio 45429, or email Tony at host@iconfetch.com. Until next time, this is Joe Kelly. Have a great day.